afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here today. This is Jazz. This is a secret society of living goddesses. We're talking today with the amazing Sheila Weir, and we're talking about her journey with anger. We're talking about Sekhmet and some top tips that you all can do. So if you're dealing with anger, how to transform that from being stuck to being a force of good in your life. So Sheila, let's start by saying just a little bit more about you, where you're from, and what brings you to this journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Jazz, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and to chat with you about anger of all things. I mean, so much to be said about anger, right? And it's one of those things that we all have and nobody wants to talk about. So, but a little bit about me. I am a certified professional coach. I work with women. And I find and have always found that we as women, we tend to live small. We follow a lot of the shoulds, and it often equates to us hitting kind of midlife, feeling very unhappy and feeling like, where did we go wrong? Because we did everything right. So why do I feel so shitty? Mm-hmm. And so I work with women to help them kind of figure out why they're feeling not like they wanted to feel or thought they would feel, and create that life that they actually want to feel. So I'm the mother of an 18-year-old special needs boy. I am from a small town in Ontario called Elmira, and I've just moved back, as you know, from Pennsylvania. So going through all of the emotions of, did I make the right decision? My parents, I love them. They're driving me crazy. And so kind of, that whole gamut of very normal, natural things to be thinking, I think, 6 weeks after a big, gigantic move. Yeah. I've spent most of my life, 25 years of my life in corporate, doing all the things that I should be doing, which is why I know this dance so well. It's a dance of my own. It's my own history that I end up coaching other women in, funny enough, because it's also their history. And it's interesting because when we started talking together and talking about this moment in time that we're doing right now and anger, it was like anger is a best friend of mine of my entire journey. And I wouldn't have said that a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, but in looking at anger and how it's shown up in my life and how it performs in my life, I realize that it's my little power friend, right? It's my power friend. Yeah. So I don't actually need to be responsible for anything because my friend Anger, have you met her? Here she comes. She's going to do all the dirty work for me.
Right.
Yeah, very, very interesting to have that aha moment when it starts kind of coming together for me like that. Yeah.
Good. I love what you just said about spending the first half of your life just about in the shoulds. Like, I should be doing everything right. I should be doing this. I should have the corporate life, should have the family, should. There was just so many should. We talked about I should have straight hair rather than letting your curly hair let loose and glorious. Like, there's so many things that we impose upon ourselves, and that does, for most people that I know, build a whole lot of resentment that we're ready to let go of. For a lot of people, it's in the mid-30s or in the 40s that it starts to unravel.
So it's interesting because starting to unravel and letting go of, I see as two different things. Yes, I believe it starts coming out. In fact, I was reading and the author had said something about when you don't let something out, it eventually comes out. It might come out sideways.
It always finds a way.
It always comes out, right? And so it might not come out on the topic you want it to come out. So when you say things start unraveling, yes, absolutely. Do we really wrestle it to the ground and understand it? No, sometimes it takes the rest of our lives to figure that out. Sometimes I don't know that we even do figure that out, right? And I don't know. I haven't got the answer to that yet, but the only thing the shoulds do is introduce shame. That's the only thing that the shoulds do. They introduce shame. And once you get shame, then you get that resentment that you're talking about. Then you get that pissed off side coming out, that anger. And again, usually not directed at the thing that the should started from, right? Usually it comes to something else. Maybe you're yelling at the kids. Maybe you're screaming at the dog. I don't know, the mailman that dropped off your package at the neighbors, whatever it is, something that is not even worthy of your fierceness, but you need to let it out.
Right.
Yeah. It's, and I mentioned to you before, I started in corporate and I did all the things that I really thought I should do.
Mhm.
I come from a divorced family, and my stepdad, who is fabulous, but he's a very hard man. He's very black and white. There's right, there's wrong, there's shoulds, there's shouldn'ts, right? We get the dualities in everything. And if you're not right, then that just by default means that you're wrong. There's
Right.
no different perspective to look at it. And so I learned the art of people pleasing.
Mhm.
Ooh, I had to find a place in this new blended family, right? I had to create something that was uniquely mine. And so the people pleasing seemed to be a role that begged me to jump into it. And I was a willing participant and said, yes, pick me. And it is something that now in my 50s, I still struggle with when I'm around my parents.
Mhm.
I don't even know if they're aware that they do it. I don't know. But the anger that I feel when they're doing it, because now I'm aware that they're doing it, it's funny. I'm still working through it. So I don't have all the brilliant answers that, people might be going, oh, what happened? Give us the end of the story. I don't have it yet. But I'm aware of it. And so I think that's often step number one, is being aware of your triggers and being aware of what in light of your triggers. So, but yeah, anger is part of it for me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see people pleasing for me as a survival strategy
Sure.
in a family where I grew up, where there was a lot of emotional anger and emotional imbalances all around. Being the people pleaser, being the nice person, helped me survive and not get crushed in the weight of everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I want to tell you, I had an aha moment this weekend
Yeah.
in chatting with my mom, and it had to do with anger. And it hit me like, it's probably so obvious, but to me, it was like my first moment of going, holy crap. And I was having a conversation with my mom on a topic that doesn't really matter. It was just a itty bitty topic. And she responded to me with a surge of emotion, a surge of anger, not rage, just, her body kind of, she leaned in, she got bigger, her voice got louder, and we'll call it anger because that's really what it was. And it hit me. She uses her anger to push me down.
Mm. Mhm.
Holy crap. She uses her anger to push me down, to keep me in my place.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And then I had to, because we have to look at ourselves and go, well, did I learn that little trick? Do I do that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I do that. I do that, especially with my son.
Mhm.
If we're going to do like a dueling kind of moment, and he has ODD, so we do dueling moments on a regular basis. I will raise myself up on the anger scale to squash his anger or whatever he's meeting me with. It's an amazing tool, because if I can keep you down and smaller than me, then I will always win, whatever the win is, right?
Yeah.
So bizarre.
When we study Reiki, there are 5 precepts for happiness in Reiki. And one of them is just for today will not anger. And when we go deeper into this topic, we see that anger and control are intertwined.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you were talking about. When you can demonstrate the anger, it shows that you are in control. So many times in our lives, I think we use, I'm angry, therefore I'm in control.
Yeah. Yeah. And vice versa, right? I'm in control, so I must be uptight, because it takes a lot of energy to be in control of all things. And even then, we know that we're not in control of much, if anything,
Yep.
but we feel this great need to control. And what we can't control outside of the world, in the outside world, we try and control in our inside world.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be how our family acts, what our house looks like, how we present ourselves. Like, it's in the simplest of things, but it's like we're wound up really, really tight.
Mm-hmm.
And then when something has to come out sideways, which again it does, it comes out with a fury that is far imbalanced to usually the thing that has sparked us.
Mm-hmm.
So it begs this question then. What would happen if us people pleasing, wound up, angry people and I want to talk about calling myself an angry person because I think there's stigma with that, but angry people, what if we just didn't try to control everything all the time? What would happen?
Yeah. It's a great question to journal. So that will be the challenge for everybody listening.
Yeah. What would happen? And I'll start off with, and I've put this much thought into that question. I don't think anything negative would happen. My first gut reaction says nothing negative would happen. All the things that I'm trying to keep up in the air, those balls would not necessarily fall to the ground like I'm convinced they're going to. Some of them would just float because they've been floating the whole time. I just didn't know it. Right. Yeah. And some of them, I don't know, like, I don't think it would be as detrimental as we tend to think.
No, I don't think so either. Because I've read the experience a few times with myself as well. And I find for myself, when I take myself out of the equation, like I admit that I do not control whatever situation it is, or I do not control someone else's response to me. I do not control what my client does when we're not together. There are things that I do not control. Yeah. And what that does is that it creates space for something better to happen. Better than what I can think of out of the tightness of control and reaction. When you leave space for the universe to work magic, miracles happen. Miracles happen, yeah. Because you're coming at it, and we talk about this when I do workshops, you're coming at it from your perspective, which is beautiful and valuable and all those things, but it's only one perspective, right? We need to look at things from a holographic view, which means multiple sides, like a stop sign with all the different angles that are going into it. I have this, and I bring this up when I'm doing coaching, and I say, tell me, client, what you see. And they go into great detail describing it's circle, it's white, maybe it's opaque, we're not really sure. And I think, oh, that's interesting. It's not at all what I see. And they look at me very confused because they don't understand what it is I could see that could be so different, until I turn it around, and all of a sudden you've got yourself a paperweight full of color, and right. And so it really has to do with our perspectives and how we are approaching things. Yeah. It's all intertwined. It really is. Yeah. And so if we relate that to Sekhmet's story as well, she had her perspective when she came to Earth. She had one purpose, and her purpose was to make people accountable to the divine again, because people had forgotten their ways. People were not grateful to the gods anymore. People were not paying their respect anymore to the divine. They had lost their way, and therefore she thought that she had to destroy everyone and everything, which we often do in our anger, right? Which is exactly what we've been talking about, right? Yeah. I'm going to raise myself up to keep you small, to keep you down. And that's exactly what she did as well, which is I'm going to be more fierce, more powerful, more loud than you. The challenge with that is I don't want to say impossible, but it takes a lot of effort to pull yourself out of that, right? It's not so hard to get up to that level for many of us, right? Many of us can get there pretty darn quickly, but to get ourselves out of that as a strategy, as a skill set is tough. It's a challenge. Yeah. And it was even tough for the goddess, which is why after her big rage, she spent thousands of years in her cave of shame, thinking about what she's done. So why do you think, here's a question thrown back at you, why do you think we have these epiphanies of the shame that we feel from the anger that has been overspent and overused? And we know it, right? We come down from that high, and it is a form of a high, the adrenaline's going. Yep. And we feel bad instinctively. Introduce shame. I shouldn't have done that, right? Again, there's a should there, but I shouldn't have done that. And yet the very next opportunity that we get to rise that wave and do it again, most times we do it. Yeah. Why do you think that is? I'm not sure. And I think it might be different for everyone. But one thing that I can think of is that it's a learned behavior. And unlearning the behavior is something that's really difficult for us to do because it's what we know. Yeah. And changing our behavior to do something that we don't know, we're not in control of what we don't know. It creates a lot more fear again. And our ego wants to be in control. So we're going to keep doing the same thing. Yeah.
I'd like to share a story with you if I can.
Mhm.
It's probably and it's not a story many people know, but it's probably my greatest rage story that I can think of. And it's a long bunch of years. So it's not like it was just a moment, like a bad moment. It was, my son is adopted. And I spent a lot of time at the beginning in the court system. And he's actually my nephew, is who he is biologically. So I had him for 3 years, and then the courts decided to give him back to bio mom. And then he came back to me a year later, and I've had him ever since. But during those first 3 years, I was the one that was fighting the fight, right? I was the one that was up in the middle of the night with his night terrors. I was the one that was taking him to all of his appointments so that he could get caught up to his milestones because he had been so deeply neglected. I was the one that was going through all of that. And so then when I had the opportunity to take Family and Children's Services to court, because what else do you do when you're just a small town Elmira girl? That's what you do. And so I did. I took them to court and we went to trial and we fought for 6 months. The fight was longer, but the trial was 6 months, and I lost because bio mom always has the chance in our system to have a second go at it. Right or wrong, there's a reality of it. But the anger that I had to keep going at the injustice of what was going on in light of what Family and Children's Services wanted to do, it was a way of life. And I realized really quickly, I think, that I'm a really good angry person. I'm really good at that shit. Yeah. Whew. And then being almost 6 feet tall, I mean, I can be kind of fierce, right? But what I realize, all joking aside, is that I can use that to intimidate people to get what I want. I'm not always successful at it. In this story that I'm sharing, I wasn't successful. I lost. It was a heartbreak. And then I turned all of that rage kind of just outward because I didn't know there's too much of it to keep it in. And it took me a very long time to kind of get that wrestled to the ground, a very, very long time. But it's amazing how that anger can also be the fuel through really difficult times. Yeah. And so we often talk about anger. I think we often view anger as being a negative, as being like a black label. Like you don't want to be called anger or angry because it's almost like a slam.
Especially as a woman.
Oh my God, you don't be angry, right? Sugar and spice and everything nice and blah, 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 blah. Except that it's 2021 and we're allowed to define how we show up. And sometimes we're going to show up a little pissed off.
And I'm very happy that sometimes we have to. Because if we want to do social change, if we want to do what's best for the planet, what's best for our families, anger can be a catalyst for those positive changes. Like you said, you have to muster something. At times I find if I'm not angry enough about something, I won't make the change. I don't have the juice to do the effort, to take action, to make the change.
Yeah. It's almost an indicator to you on your passion level, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up because I'm a core energy coach. So we talk about the different core energies and there's catabolic and anabolic. And the catabolic, there's two, but level 2 in our 7-level tier is conflict, which is where anger comes in, right? It is short-lived. It's bursts. It's combined with your adrenaline. That's kind of how it comes, just as you just finished saying. And it is a great place. That's where change happens. Yeah. Change doesn't happen when you're laid back and feeling good. It certainly isn't happening when you're zenning out and doing your meditation, right? It's not happening when you're curled up in the ball, feeling bad for yourself because something horrible happened. Change only happens in that level 2 energy, which is that conflict, which is that anger. And so it's a beautiful thing. It really can be. I think the balance is not to live in there on every topic at every moment, because I think that's when it starts festering. And festering is a brilliant word for it, because I can't think of anything more accurate than the word festering for what you keep inside. It has to come out at some point. It has to.
I think that's a beautiful teaching point right there. That one, we have to celebrate our anger. Anger is a force of change, but it has to be in those small bursts rather than the festering all the time. Because I think that if you're festering in anger all the time, and then you're angry with the whole world, there's a wound that's a little bit deeper there that needs to be looked at.
Well, here's the other thing too, is that you end up, when you're festering all the time, you end up breaking connections in your world. So those relationships, there's a price to being angry all the time.
Yeah.
And it's usually in the form of a relationship that is being eroded or scarred. And that it then connects with our connection, right? When we start losing connections because we're angry all the time, that's not serving us, because we're human beings and humans like to connect, right? As women especially, we love to connect. That is our holy grail.
Yeah.
So we do really need to be mindful of our anger and how we're using it. If we're using it like a really high octane gas to get things done, then I'm pull out that anger and let's use it, right? Let's create change. Let's get advocacy going. Let's get justice going. But if we're using it and not, maybe it's not even a case of using it. If we're holding it and it's not using, we're not using it to go from a place to another place, a better place, then I think that's when it becomes dangerous for us.
And
Yeah.
I think you're talking about relationships that are being sacrificed. I think the biggest relationship that is being sacrificed is a relationship to self. When you don't admit your anger. And I see that some of the symptoms I see of that is chronic fatigue, chronic depression, and chronic sadness.
I'd like to add to that list, unfortunately, chronic busyness.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm busy, I don't need to be alone with myself. I don't need to listen to what's going on up here. I know I have a lot of people that I come across and they're like, "Ooh, I would love to have a coach. That'd be so awesome. I just don't have time." I'm like, "Okay, I'll give you a free one." I remember one woman, she's fabulous. And she was fabulous, very, very successful on the surface, but not resonating with her own success, I don't think. And so I thought if I gave her a free session, it would sweeten the pot and she'd dive in. It's been 1.5 years since I offered that, and she still hasn't taken me up on it. She verbally has accepted it, but she hasn't given me timeframes that will work with her. Anyway, it sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but my point is that when we keep ourselves super crazy busy, we then don't have to look at those things that are going on in our worlds, and we don't really have to reflect on them, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do with all this?
Do you have top tips?
Well, I can tell you a few things that I practice. It doesn't make the anger go away, but it gives me the space that I need. I think one of the most valuable things that we as women can give ourselves is time. And I mean that not just in the conversation of anger, but just in our worlds. We don't give ourselves time to just be. We always have to do. There's always something to do. But sometimes we just need to be, and we often feel guilt when we are just being, right? I shouldn't be sitting here watching TV. I shouldn't be doing this, I don't know, crossword puzzle, whatever it is. Again, we're talking shoulds, right? So it's expectations from others on what you should be doing. But sometimes we need to just be. And so I guess my first tip would combine the act of being, but it would also, let's just do this thing called breathing. Seriously, I say that to clients all the time and they always greet me with the same response, which is a laugh. Like, Jazz, do you need to breathe? No, I'm serious. I feel like we should start with some breath work. And they're like, they really they're having a really hard time with the idea of sitting still and the art of breathing. Yeah. And so I guess tip number 1 is take some time to breathe. And there's many different techniques, but I'll share with you and everybody else one of the easiest forms. I'll speed through it. We won't actually do it, but it is doing it in the shape of a box, a square, right? You know this one. It's not a unique one. I start at a count of 3 or 4. Sometimes you can go up to a count of 7, but if you're new at this, starting with a smaller count is easier. You count to 3 while you're breathing in, then you hold it for a 3 count, then you breathe out to a 3 count, then you hold that for a 3 count. So everything that you're doing is in the shape of a box and it's a 3 count. Where's the benefit of that? The benefit of that is multiple, but while you're thinking of counting to 3 and keeping your brain focused on a square, because you're trying to remember, are you breathing in, holding, or breathing out, or holding? You're no longer thinking of what other things have been stressing you out, weighing you down, pulling in different directions, right? That's melted away because you are trying desperately to keep to a 3 count, hold for a 3 count, right? Your brain is now wrapped up with this box 3 count or 4 count. So my first tip that I'd like to encourage us to spend more time doing is to just be. And while we're being, breathe. And you don't have to do it for hours on end. Go around the box 4 times. You're in a different mindset, guaranteed. Guaranteed. Yeah. Do you breathe?
I do. It's funny in the Akashic Records and other courses that I teach is the pyramid breath, because we're often with ancient Egypt, so with Sekhmet. So it said, so you go up the pyramid and you hold at the apex, then you breathe out, and then you come back, and it's pyramid shaped instead of a box. But it's the same thing, right? And for people who suffer with a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, we forget to breathe. Just physiologically, the breath is upper chest as opposed to being down below. And did you know, that's something I learned when I did my pelvic floor, I had a physiotherapist, is even the pelvic floor muscles are supposed to move with every breath.
Are they?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yep, they move with every breath. So take a nice deep breath down to the belly, and you can feel the pelvic floor just go like a balloon.
Isn't that interesting? See, maybe I need to be more mindful about my breath work too.
Yeah, the best way to feel it is when we squat. And it's supposed to be really good for women to squat because it relaxes those lower pelvic muscles as well. Better for the bladder, better for the uterus and lower back.
I love it. I love that. That's awesome. I'm going to have to squat when we're done and do some breathing.
And breathe.
I won't do that now, but I'm going to try that later when I'm off. Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. But, you know, and joking and just aside, even the act of if you're sitting on a conference call with work or the kids are screaming or whatever is your jam, you can just take a few seconds, 20 seconds, right? And do some breathing. Sometimes I do it when I'm driving, eyes open. But, you know, so you can incorporate it anywhere. But the reality is just focusing on the breath going in and the breath going out. Yep. When you're focusing on it, you're not thinking about whatever stressed you out. So I love that. Something else that I love to do, and I guess we'll call it a tip because I think it's a brilliant thing to do, and that is put pen to paper. Write down your stuff. Write it down. There's something about, you know, we've been talking about holding it in, and if we don't let it out, it's going to fester and come out when it wants to, when it needs to, and it may not be kind of aligned with when you want it to come out or the right place or the right person. So if we sit down and we actually, the act of writing, it's almost like I've made it real and it's there in front of me and it's no longer here and I can let a little piece of it go. It hasn't solved the problem. It hasn't resolved anything, but it's created a little bit of that anxious space that's up here and it's taken it, it's put it somewhere else. I sometimes will have clients write the nastiest note that you could possibly come up with to the person that's upset you the most and then burn it. No, I never say give it to the person because that's not the act. The act is really about getting it out of yourself. And I also think that when we are really upset about something, like we've said, it's an indicator of our passion to the whole thing and how strongly it resonates with us, which does not mean it's going to resonate that strongly with the other person or other people, right? This is really a journey of self in coming to terms with your anger. It's not about it's not like I'm upset with you, Jazz. You have to now see how upset I am and feel upset too. No, what I really want is I want to be heard. I want to be heard. And sometimes that can't happen. So if you write it down, at least you've spoken without interruption and it's being held somewhere in space.
Yeah.
So I would say writing it down. I'm a firm supporter. I write everything down. I have journals all over the place.
So do
Yep.
I.
Mhm.
Behind.
Yep, absolutely. Like they're brilliant, and they're not for anyone else to read. And quite frankly, I never go back and reread my stuff.
No.
Never go back and reread it. Why? I'm past wherever that was, even if it was yesterday. Even if the thing is still going on today, I'm past where I was when I wrote that yesterday. So I don't go back and reread ever. No.
I have for a few little things, just because I pick up a book and then I just open up and it's like a passage from the past. But what it makes me realize, it's how much I've grown and the nugget of wisdom that came out of that writing session.
Yeah.
And so that I use that as a celebration more than a going back into the juice of it.
Right. That's a brilliant way of looking at it, because it is a celebration, right? There is growth and evolution that has happened from that point. I'm always, I think, afraid that I'm going to get sucked back into it. And so I myself don't want to look back, because I don't want to get, oh yeah, that really did upset me, and now I'm upset again about it, right? I don't want that to kind of happen. So I just keep moving forward as best I can, and leave it at that. But yeah, good for you.
Yeah, I think it was
So-
Danielle Laporte also, another fabulous coach from Vancouver, and she had a book burning session with all of the journals. Yeah.
I love Danielle Laporte. I really do. She is fabulous. I didn't know that she was in Vancouver. I was hoping she was more closer to the Toronto area. Selfishly so. I'm like, come over here, come to the east
She's
side.
out west.
That's too bad. But yeah, it makes sense, right? It does make sense. Yeah, she's absolutely fantastic. She was the first one that actually taught me about Mercury retrograde.
Right.
Right. And I had heard about it, but I didn't really know about it. And then I was doing some reading with one of her books, and she brought it up again, saying, don't launch anything during Mercury retrograde. And I went, well, if Danielle's saying this, and this must be gospel, and I need to learn more about what it is. And so, yeah, don't launch anything when you're going through Mercury retrograde. It's that simple.
Yep. Yeah. Depending where Mercury is in your chart. And that's my whole other astrological training that can kick into place.
Yeah, well, then we need to set up a separate call so that we can dive into that, because I'm like, oh, these dates are like, they're off for launches. I don't do anything during these dates. And it takes about 3 months out of my year, right, that I can't do anything because it's a Mercury retrograde. So that's, not fabulous.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing I want to share with everybody as we're talking about anger and talking about tips. The breathing is brilliant, and I'm absolutely a firm supporter of the writing. I don't know how to say this, because I'm not sure it's something that one can teach. I think it's something that we become. But when we get to this stage, man, run with it, run with it. And that is a stage of being okay that you're pissed off about something. I used to feel like I had to hide when I was angry about something, or if I couldn't hide my anger, which for me is not an easy thing to do. So I just usually let it kind of just go. I then go into the emotion that comes after, which is my best friend, guilt. Right. So then guilt comes in, probably brings my cousin shame. And before you know it, we have a little party, the three of us. And I sit heavily with that stuff. Like, I often joke I should be Catholic because I feel that guilt so heavily, right? I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a people-pleasing thing coming out. I don't know. But I finally come to terms, and it's just recently, that, you know what? Sometimes I'm going to get pissed off. And sometimes I'm going to yell and swear and scream when I'm pissed off, or not want to talk to you when I'm pissed off, or want space from you when I'm pissed off. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Breathe into that one and celebrate it. That's a huge one.
There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not my lifestyle. It's a moment in my life where I'm pissed and I need to feel this emotion. And I think, and where was it? Oh, I wish I could think of the book. Wish I could think of it. Oh, Glennon Doyle in her novel, Untamed. She says that you can't turn off your feeling of certain emotions.
Mhm.
You either feel or you don't feel. You can't feel just the good, just the easy stuff, and not feel the heavy, hard stuff. You have to feel all of it.
Yeah.
And when we turn off the dial of feeling, we turn it off to all emotions, which made me start thinking, then it's okay that I'm allowed to some days be sad and other days be angry and other days be giddy with joy just because it's Monday, like, and that I've stopped apologizing for, which is hard being Canadian and stop apologizing, but I've stopped apologizing to my family when I'm in a pissy mood.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This year I have a new name. It's Sassy Jazz.
Ooh, Sassy Jazz. I like that.
And my husband knows that, oh, we're dealing with Sassy Jazz today. And then Sassy Jazz can say whatever she wants to say with all the F-bombs that she wants to say, because it's part of that container of this new understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So tell me, when he says that Sassy Jazz, is this just acknowledgement that Sassy Jazz is in the house, or is this his way of trying to put a smile on everybody's face so that Sassy Jazz is more manageable?
No, it's, I think that we both like Sassy Jazz in a certain way because she's lively and she says things, like she calls the things the way that she sees it.
Yeah.
And she's very straightforward. And so it's fun because then she sees life a little bit more like a satire rather than being a victim. And so in that moment of anger, and then like, oh, this thing that happened in my business today, or this thing that happened outside in the world, or like these people piss me off and this is why. And we can have fun with it as opposed to feeling guilty about it, as opposed to feeling sad. It's more empowering, but there's that safe container in a way where things can get expressed and it's not coming out sideways like we've been talking since the beginning, right?
So isn't it interesting, because you're letting Sassy Jazz come out to bring all that feeling that's inside out as you want her to come out in a safe space, which is home with your husband, and you're going, hey, Sassy Jazz is in the house.
Yeah.
Rather than denying that you've got Sassy Jazz in you and denying what you're feeling in that moment. And as we've said 1,000 times, she's coming out. That girl's coming out, right? Sassy Jazz is not going to be kept quiet for long.
No, she's done being quiet.
Well, now she's done, but even if you tried to contain her, she's going to come out.
Yeah.
That's why she's sassy. You can't keep something or someone sassy contained for very long, right? Yeah. I don't know. I got to tell you, sometimes I feel the most alive. I don't know that I should say this, but I'm going to, when I'm angry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
right?
a powerful emotion.
Yeah. But is it a true emotion?
Well, you feel it, right? To get into the semantics of it.
Well, so here's what I've always believed. I again, just food for thought, right? This isn't a declaration on some kind of truth. It's just maybe a truth of the lowercase t. So anger is not a true emotion. Anger is an emotion, I believe, that covers up another emotion.
Mm.
So if I sit down and I think of all the times that I get angry, and there's different reasons, so I'm not going to go through all of them now, but a lot of it that's underneath is fear, mm-hmm. or worry, mm-hmm. right? I worry that my kid's not going to get it, mm-hmm. and is never going to leave the house. Mm-hmm. So I yell it into him, right? Because maybe if I yell it the right way, at the right pitch and the right angle, it's going to go into the ear and hit the right part of his brain that's going to absorb the information I'm trying to get. Right?
So that's a value statement in a way too, right?
Yeah, explain.
It's important for you that he leaves the house at some point and gains some his independence. It's important for you.
It's important. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And I wrestle with, that must make me a bad mom because I don't want to, mother and parent for every day.
As who?
I don't know.
Where does that judgment come from?
My shoulds. Well, let's rewind to the beginning of the call when we talked about my parents, right? There's a lot of labels going on here. Yeah. But yeah, so I sit down and I think of fear that he's not going to get it, or worry that he's not going to get it. I'm picking on him. I don't always get angry at him. I do get angry at other people, but he's just really low hanging fruit, as they say. So, I wonder, so what do you think about that? Let's just talk about that for a split second. Anger, is it a true emotion, or is it emotion and we feel it, so it's true, but is it a core emotion?
I have seen from a few psychologists, trainers, that there's a wheel of emotion, and fear is more on the periphery. Not fear, I mean anger is on the periphery, just like you mentioned, because there are other things underneath the anger.
Yeah.
So it's a true emotion because it exists.
Right.
And I don't want people to bypass, especially in the spiritual world, people bypass anger all the time. Should ourselves, because I'm spiritual, I should not feel anger. That should be out of my vocabulary, but you can't turn it down. So it's true, it exists. We need to acknowledge it. And at the same time, there is always, when you feel really angry, there's always a potential to dig deeper, go deeper and deeper.
Yes, because I agree with what you said, that it does kind of highlight a value somewhere down there. It's been crossed or threatened in some way. Yeah. Think about road rage. People that get upset when they're driving because somebody cut them off. Mm-hmm. We see that as a sign of disrespect. Yep. Right? Which is a value that many people hold how we show respect differs from individual to individual a lot of times. But the idea of being disrespected is a huge thing for many, many people. And so somebody cutting you off in traffic, right, just rises within you. Yeah. Interesting. I'm going to have to now go in search of that wheel of emotions that you were talking about. So
I will attach it under the video.
Oh, that's even better. That would be absolutely awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think we just embrace our anger, really, which doesn't mean we use it as a daily tool, but don't be afraid of it. Yeah. Don't be afraid of it, right? It's great change can come in our worlds because of our anger. Yeah.
And I do believe that is what Sekhmet is here to teach us, to not be afraid of it. And at the same time, to not use it as a destructive force, but use it for fierce love, fierce self-love.
Yes.
And healing for ourselves and others.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I love it. I have to tell you, I love what you're doing right now, Jazz. And I love this goddess. She speaks to me. I see a lot of myself in her, or vice versa. I'm not sure which, but it's pretty amazing stuff. It's pretty amazing stuff. So, and it makes me feel like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay to just be all the things that I am. So I hope everybody that's going through this can feel that same way too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
this is called, it's for living goddesses, because the goddesses live through us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, remember I reached out to you and I was like, oh my God, is it possible to feel this affinity with a goddess? And you're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So nothing is more truer than what you've just said, for sure. Good. I love it.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much for this conversation. If anybody wants to reach out to you and continue the conversation, where should they go?
If they want to reach out to me, they can email me, and I'm at sheila@sheilaweir.com. Mm-hmm. I also can be found on my website, which is sheilaweir.com. So maybe we can put it in the comments. So the correct spelling of my last name, which sometimes throws people off a little bit, but yeah, sheila@sheilaweir.com is how they can get a hold of me. Thank you. Yeah, loved it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. May the goddess continue to live through you and bless you with abundance and love. And so it is.
And a little bit of anger.
A little bit of blessed anger.
Thank you, Jazz.